dark, spooky world where fear takes over. Get ready to face the unknown. Welcome to a place where nightmares come alive, where shadows hide secrets, and every breath sends shivers down your spine. Take a deep breath as you step into a realm that will test your courage. Lock your doors, hold on to hope, for within these depths, something sinister awaits. Prepare yourself for a journey into true terror. My partner, early 30s M, and I, late 20s F, live in a basement suite, which we're currently trying to move out of. Housing market is absolute shite right now, and have been dealing with kind of weird neighbors for some time now. It started 6 years ago when he and I first started dating. His neighbors got this massive high-energy dog, which they promptly chained up with a 3-foot lead to a tree in their backyard. The dog, no surprise, wasn't socialized and became aggressive several times, even once attacking me and my smaller dog. We were both fine, but the neighbor's wife had not noticed the dog slip out of its chains and bolt for me and my elderly pup. I screamed at her to come get her dog while I held the dog by the collar away, arm's length, from my elderly dog who I scooped up by the scruff. The dog was strong and left bruises on me from its pawing and thrashing, and several scratches from it trying to bite me and scratch me with its unclipped claws. The wife merely looked over and went "Ha." Totally relaxed and dumbfounded. I screamed at her for a good couple minutes before she realized what was happening and ran over, yelling at me. He would never hurt anyone. Meanwhile, he's already hurt me and is baring his teeth with raised fur. Needless to say, my partner and I took action. Side note, my dog has since passed. She lived a good life and thankfully didn't die in a horrible way, just old age. We filed a report with the city as well as animal control about a neglected aggressive dog. The city reacted quickly when they read the report and conducted an investigation of the dog's living site, and the dog got mysteriously rehoused shortly after the incident. My city has a good policy for animal welfare, so we weren't worried about the dog being put down or anything. He went to live with someone who deals with reactive abused dogs. We followed up with the animal rescue that came to collect the dog. This family has also owned several outdoor cats. Bad idea in this area due to wildlife, and being literally 2 minutes away from a main road. We've seen a few of their cats dead on the sidewalks before from losing a fight with something much bigger. Needless to say, these neighbors are horrible people. These neighbors also decided about 3 years ago to flip their house into a sort of hostel, building cheap rooms to rent under the table. This attracted some sketchy individuals within about a month of them completing the rooms. The same group has been staying in these rooms now for at least 2 years now. 4 people who act bizarrely with 2 regularly visiting friends. A quick summary of their weird doings includes peering through our windows into our bedroom, walking across the boundary line of our backyard, and staring at our home, and standing outside our car garage just staring blankly at the door, waiting for it to open. They haven't actually done anything illegal, except maybe trespassing, but the staring is so animalistic, if that makes sense. Tonight my partner and I were in bed chatting in the dark when we saw the back alley light turn on. Our window to the alley is in the bedroom, and someone with bare feet sprinted past the window several times over. Each time they ran by, we'd hear a thud like they were dropping something heavy and dense, but glass, kind of sounded like a falling jar of jam. Weird, but the best way I can describe it. Otherwise, it was completely silent in between the sprinting sessions. This went on for a few minutes, and at one point I looked in our mirror, which faces the window. To my horror, I see the legs of someone standing in the dark, right outside our window. Basement suite. We can see people's lower halves walk by. They had been standing so still that the detection light had turned off again. I said a fairly loud, "What the expletive is that?" Then the person sprinted away again. My partner immediately got out of bed and went outside to see what was going on. He's a big guy and wasn't worried, but more so annoyed. I'm waiting inside and keeping our cat near me. She's pacing around the windows with her hair raised. Even she knows something isn't right. My partner returns a moment later, and he's looking confused and irritated. I ask what he saw, and he explains that when he peered over into their yard, he saw them all sitting in lawn chairs in a perfect circle, 6 of them all together, completely silent, staring at him. A chill ran down my spine. He said they weren't smoking or drinking, just sitting in the pitch-black dark, staring directly at him. A moment or two later, we hear them all scuttling around in the backyard for about a minute. Then it all went silent again. Our back alley light keeps going off, and I'm honestly kind of freaked out. They just have that creepy bad air about them. We've locked all our doors and windows and shut the blinds. Hopefully, this is enough to deter them from peering in. Anyway, just wanted to rant about Hat for a sec. It's just as creepy as it is honestly annoying. Wish us luck in dealing with these weirdos. We were at a Sportsman warehouse in Colorado with our parents. I was 14, and my little brother was 12. We were on a trip to see family, so we were about done walking around, and decided to sit down in the camping chair aisle while we were waiting for our parents to be done shopping. While we were sitting there, a lady that looked cracked up on some sort of drug walked up to us and started asking us weird questions. She asked us, "Where is the Colorado River? Can you show me on the map in the front where the Colorado River is?" There was a map of the US in the front of the store right by the entrance. She kept telling us to walk up there with her because she needed help finding the Colorado River on it. We both were weirded out and started to walk and find our parents. She kept following us and didn't stop. We found our parents, and I told them what happened. My mom started to yell at the lady, but she wasn't going away even after that. We checked out and started leaving the store. When we walked out, we saw the creepy lady and 3 or 4 men run out of the store and near a van that was hidden out of any camera's view. 2 of the men were waiting outside of the store, and that's when I realized what was happening. The lady wanted my little brother to go to the front of the store so the 2 men could abduct him and run to the van. I'm so glad we followed our instincts and didn't follow the lady. To this day, I am very cautious when I go into town. Because I live on the border of Mexico and Arizona. Don't talk to strangers, even if you are an adult. You never know how many people are in on the abduction. Me and my friend were just walking in our neighborhood at sunset. It's a pretty safe neighborhood. People are usually outside in the evening walking their dogs and working in the yards. It's not busy per se, but it's not a silent, dark neighborhood that no one walks around. We were having a conversation while walking when an early 2000s green SUV pulls up with an older man and a big yellow lab in the back poking its head out the window nonchalantly. The man matches his car speed to us about 4 away and has a big smile while he says something. I didn't hear him, so I said, "Huh," in an uninterested tone, and kept walking as he followed. He was an older man, maybe in his 50s, with an unnaturally wide-eye smile. I said, "Where's your dog? Why aren't you walking your dog?" I was so confused. "I don't have one." And keep walking. "You want to walk my dog?" I was starting to get really weird vibes at this point, as he is still pulled up to the side of us while we are still walking. What kind of question is that? "No," I said. "Come here, I'll give you $20 to walk my dog." I was like, "What the fuck, dude? Who are you?" "No, I don't like dogs." I looked at the guy, then my friend, and we were both really getting creeped out by this guy. Every instinct in me was yelling at me to tell this guy to leave us alone and stop following us. "You don't like dogs? Well, do you like cats?" I started looking around for an escape route, and a couple walking their dog rounded the corner of the street we were approaching. At this point, we are both extremely freaked out and just want to get the hell away from this guy. Why is he following us? Why is he asking these weird questions? I told myself if he asked one more question, I was going to respond with a "leave us alone." I saw my chance to get away from the situation. "Well, I'll give you $20 to take my dog for a walk." It's $20. We ignore him and I immediately decided to change routes and turned us around. As we start to walk near the other couple with their dog, we hear him say to his lab, "And if you look over here, you'll see another dog," all while still smiling in a smooth, rehearsed manner. We kept looking back to see if he was following us, but he rounded the corner and left. I have no idea what this man's intentions were, but they were not innocent. Why are you pulling up to pedestrians trying to pawn your dog off? Why are you following us? Why aren't you taking social cues of disinterest and nose and leave us alone? This was an extremely weird interaction of him trying to get us to come to his car and interact with his dog. Nothing about this felt normal or just friendly conversation. His motive was trying to get us to his vehicle. We have no idea if he had a passenger with a gun/weapon to try and mug/kidnap us. Maybe he was just crazy. So this was back in about 2004-05. Memory is blurry since it was such a long time ago. And I was only in about 2nd or 3rd grade. I was an extremely shy girl and didn't have many friends except 1 or 2. We were walking in a long, orderly line following the teacher through an outside hallway by the entrance after coming back from recess. Playtime break for kids. All of a sudden, this somewhat grown adult or teenager, looked like an older teenager from what I remember and had blondish hair, looked like a typical skater kid or something, came up to me and said, "Hey." I was a bit startled, wondering why this kid would be talking to me, but at the same time in my childish brain, felt cool that an older kid, hell, even someone that actually wanted to talk to me, because not a lot of kids ever wanted to talk to me because I was shy. I was also bullied for it too. So you can imagine this came as a surprise to me. This is a bit of a blur right here, but he basically had said something along the lines of, "Weirdo, is your name Burger Distraction?" Me, yes. Weirdo. I know your sister, she's really cool, you're cool too, we should hang out sometime, you know. I think it would be fun. Me. Oh, okay, yeah, sure. Weirdo. I'll be waiting for you by the parking lot. Me. Okay, bye. The kid left in a hurry. Matter of fact, when he came up to me, he was walking all fast, looking like he was in a rush. Some girl behind me asked if I knew that guy, and I said no. The thing is, when he said he knew my sister, in my dumb kid brain, I immediately trusted him, because if my older sister knew him, and she was quite popular in high school and had lots of friends, then he must be someone I can trust. I told my mother, thank God I did, that some older kid wanted to hang with me, and I wanted to hang with him too. My mother was furious and scared, understandably. I thought I was in trouble and got scared. She told the teacher about him, and both my mother and teacher scolded me to never speak to strangers or someone you don't know. That kid never showed up again and just straight up disappeared. The creepiest part, I asked my sister if she knew a guy like that from the physical descriptions I gave her. She said she had no idea who I was referring to and didn't know anybody like that. Possible stalker. Ick. We were thinking he may have been one of our neighbor's older brother, who was physically abused by his father, but we are not entirely sure as his face is still a bit blurry to me. This happened a few summers ago. My friends and I threw a going-away party for our friend that is going to migrate to Canada. We went to this island, and it was during their non-peak season. So that means that we were the only guests there. We arrived at the island just around after lunchtime. A few kilometers away from the resort, there's this small village just near the port. When we arrived to the said port, the resort's service vehicle was not there. They alerted us that they're going to be late because their vehicle broke down. So we decided to stop by this small store and bought some other necessities that we forgot to buy in the mainland. There was this group of men around their late 20s that were catcalling us. Our group consists of 5 girls and 4 boys, and one came up to me and asked for my number. I refused politely, and one guy friend ushered me away from him. Thank heavens, our service arrived, but he was still staring at me, and to be honest, it creeped me out. When we arrived at the resort, it had cottages that were on stilts. You have to climb a bamboo ladder to get in the room. It was also made from bamboo, just your typical hut. Even the floors were made from bamboo. The bathroom is separated from the huts and is for common use. We partied, and I got tipsy fast, because I'm a lightweight. I excused myself from the group and climbed up the cottage to change into my swimwear. My friends really wanted to go island hopping. I was also planning to take a swim in the beach and island hop, just to lessen the buzz. I was not able to change. Since the room just started spinning, I decided to just nap it out. I told my friends to just go without me. It was a long debate because they didn't want to leave me all alone, but I insisted that they should go. After a few beggings, they went on island hopping without me. When I woke up, it was already around twilight. The resort was quiet. It was a bit dim inside the room. The resort hadn't turned on the lights since the electricity only runs via solar and generator. They only turn on the generators around 7 p.m. I can already feel a hangover. I used my phone's flashlight to help me see. I noticed that the door was slightly ajar. I was sure that it was closed when my friends left. When I was about to close it, the head of the guy from earlier popped out, and he gave me that creepy smile and was still asking for my number. I told him to get out, but he was begging for my number. He even used his foot to stop the door from closing. I screamed, and he kept on saying in our language, which translates to, "Ma'am, let's fuck." I kept on screaming, and I called my friends. What he said made me shake. He said that my friends hadn't arrived yet. He was standing there for hours, and he was watching us. I kept on screaming for the caretakers of the island. I screamed help, and finally I saw the beams of the flashlight running towards us. He quickly left, and he ran towards the forest just behind the hut. I was shaking, to the point that I was not able to stand up. My friends arrived, and the caretakers told my friends about what happened. They asked for the help of the caretakers and the local chief of the island. They went on a manhunt to look for the guy. Sadly, he was not seen. We left the same night and just transferred to another island with a much private resort. This is something I've never really told anyone about, but I've been thinking about it a lot lately, so here it is. A few years back, 2015 to 2016, when I was 18 to 19, I used to work at this little cafe inside of a car parts factory. It was basically a full-out but compact restaurant kitchen and lunchroom for the workers to eat there. Well, this one day, I get a call from my best friend / coworker. She's all kinds of upset because of this creepy new temp worker that made her feel severely uncomfortable by asking her a bunch of personal questions, like what she drove, where she lived, if she was single, had any kids, when she got off work, etc. She didn't want to walk out to her car alone. Mind you, she was my age too, 18 to 19, and this dude was mid to late 30s, if not already in his early 40s, and we're in Flint, Michigan, so we weren't about to take any chances. I drive up to the parking lot, find her car, park next to it, and she has a security guard escort her out. We didn't see the guy then, but she described him to me and the guard, and that was that for a few days. Someone found him and told him to stay away from her, and he did. But then he met me. I knew exactly who he was as soon as he stepped up to the register to place his lunch order, just from the description I had been given and by the creepy vibes he was giving off. He pulled the same intense Q and A on me that he had done to my friend too, but instead of telling him to fuck off or calling security or anything like that, I just told him a bunch of straight-up lies. I told him that I drove a blue 2012 Honda Civic, which I knew for a fact was one of the second shift manager's vehicles who always parked near the front of the building. And so I knew that it was going to be there until second shift ended at 11:00 p.m. I also told him that my shift ended around 9:30, which was really the time that I usually slipped out for a cigarette break. So when 9:30 hit later that night, I walked outside to smoke my cigarette, and I saw exactly what I was expecting to see. That stupid creep in the parking lot, close to the area that the Honda Civic was sitting. He was just pacing back and forth behind two vehicles that were parked a few spaces down in the same row, playing on his phone the entire time. At one point he glanced up and saw me staring at him, but I had my big leather winter coat and a hat on, so I don't know if he recognized me at first from a distance or not. I finished my smoke and went back inside and explained the entire situation to the security guards, one of which was the original guard that had escorted my friend out to her car a couple days before, and they were dying laughing at the fact that I had pulled one over on the prick and had actually caught him being shady. I'm not sure what exactly they did about it, because I went back to work after that, but I do know that they immediately went out and confronted him in the parking lot, and that the guy was fired that same week. To this day, I still don't know what his intentions were, but it doesn't take a genius to figure out that it couldn't have been anything good. So ultimately, the moral of the story is always have your friends' backs and trust your instincts, because if you don't, you could end up cornered in a parking lot and possibly attacked or abducted by some creepy guy who asked one too many questions. EDIT, since I didn't include it originally. After my friend and I were informed that the guy was fired, we were told his full name, and my friend paid to run a background check on him, and it came back with a violent criminal history of domestic abuse, assault, and battery with a weapon. Jail time served for violating a PPO and parole and some other things. Hope this clarifies the fact that we weren't just picking up creepy vibes. When my boyfriend and I first moved into our house, we didn't yet have a washer and dryer installed, so we'd take our clothes to a laundromat the next town over. It was a few minutes out of the way, but it was a place my boyfriend had frequented before I moved to join him in the area. The place was clean and decently maintained, and we felt good supporting a small family business. The people that ran the laundromat were two adults and their son. I believe the son was in his early 20s, and he was there every time we went. I got the impression he didn't have much of a life outside of work, but he was always friendly, talking to patrons, mostly about sports and the like. One thing about the son, however, is he could be a little too hands-on helpful. For example, the second your dryer load was done, he'd come flying over to alert you. Even if you were standing right next to the machine, he'd stand there and wait for you to unload, and then immediately start wiping down the inside. I assume this was probably a routine his mom had ingrained into him to make sure the dryers were always clean and dry, but it could make things feel a bit awkward and rushed. At first, my boyfriend and I would go together and do our own separate loads. But since I wasn't working at the time, I figured I could do both of ours on my own during the work week. The first trip I took by myself went fine. It was a less busy day, and while I'm not much of a talker, I'm sure the owner's son and I exchanged a few words during that time. At one point, I just unloaded the dryer and was busy folding clothes when he walked over to return an article of clothing I'd left behind. I appreciated the gesture, but I found it a little odd that he didn't just hand me my piece of clothing. Rather, he was swinging it around the tip of his finger and grinning. I shrugged it off as him being bored. His act of customer service did prompt me to write a short online review. I'd noticed other people had made complaints about the mother being rude or pushy. One even made a snide remark about a Chinaman. Pretty sure the family was Korean. They'd always seemed odd to me, and I figured I'd add some positivity. The guy had been on his own that day, and still wanting to be supportive of a small-town business, I noted the quality of service with a few kind words. I later wondered if doing so had been a mistake. Exactly a week later, I went back to do our weekly laundry load. When I pulled up, I noticed there were no other cars in the parking lot. As I was backing my car into a space, I saw the son standing in the doorway. He was grinning and watching me pull in. He was definitely extra friendly on this day, and there was a different vibe to his typical extroversion. It was the middle of the day and the laundromat was close to a busy gas station, so it wasn't like I was completely isolated and alone. But something felt very off about being alone with him. I sat at a table by the window and did my best to keep myself occupied. When I got up to grab my clothes from the washer, he smiled from where he was sitting and asked, "How does it feel being the only ones in here today?" I was already unnerved being alone as it was. I just smiled and went, "Heh, yeah," and continued unloading clothes. He then started trying to make conversation. "I was thinking about going to the water park tomorrow. Wednesdays are my only day off. He mentioned that he can never find anyone to go with, and asked if I liked going to that water park. I said that I hadn't been yet. He basically repeated what he'd said before, including the part where he can never find anyone to go with. At this point, as creepy as it was starting to feel, I was also amused because I knew he'd seen me in there with my boyfriend many times, and I was clearly doing laundry for two. That, and I was well over a decade older than this kid. I still figured he was just making bored small talk, so I nodded and continued with what I was doing. But then he asked, "When you go swimming, do you wear a one-piece or a two-piece swimsuit?" Excuse me. Oh, I haven't gone swimming in years, I said, trying to evade the question. He asked the question again, like he hadn't asked it already. "Well, when you do go swimming, do you like to wear a one-piece or two-piece swimsuit?" Again, I tried to evade the question, saying I hadn't gone swimming in years. But he kept repeating the question, trying to get me to answer. He would just not let up. I am blessed in certain areas, and while I'm not running around like Kelly Bundy most of the time, I do dress in a manner that, while tame in most places I've lived, is considered less modest than the average woman where I live. But even at that, I am not Stifler's mom. I don't know what kind of male fantasy this dude had cooked up since we last met, but he seemed to think his pervy line of questioning was going to lead to something. I don't remember how this conversation even ended, but I did my best to avoid him while I waited for my laundry to dry. Unfortunately, this included having him alert me when my dryer was done. The dryers didn't always do a thorough job the first time. So while I was adding extra quarters, the guy opened the machine, reached in and started pushing my laundry, which was my underwear in this case, to the middle of the machine. I was never coming back to this place. When I went home, I told my boyfriend about the incident, and he was just as disgusted by the guy's line of questioning. A week later, we had a new washer and dryer set installed. To give you some context, in 2021, I got my first job as an order picker in a food processing company. Being a very unsocial person, I managed to negotiate with my boss to work with the small night shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. It's quite ridiculous, because there's nothing good about being an order picker when you compare it with other jobs. But for me, it was heaven. I could work on my own without having to interact with other people. One evening, my father dropped me off in front of the company at 9 p.m. and left. He couldn't take me any later because he was too tired to drive any later that night. So I sit down on the ground next to the building and start lighting up a cigarette and hanging out on my phone. A few minutes later, a man emerges from the darkness, well-dressed and well-groomed and carrying a rucksack. He walks over to sit on the ground next to me. At the time, he looked like an ordinary employee, so I thought he must have forgotten a file and come back to get it. But the strange thing was that the building was still open, so the man could have gone straight in to get his papers. When I remembered, I was really scared and wondered what this man wanted and why he was sitting so close to me. Being paranoid by nature, I imagined all sorts of creepy things he could do to attack me, but fortunately, he didn't do anything. He just sat there and didn't move an inch, as if he'd become a statue. After several minutes of silence during which I stressed, and he did literally nothing, it was 9:50 p.m. So I entered the building, and the man did the same. I was even more worried, but then I remembered that the building had security cameras, and that reassured me after all. Why would he attack me in the building which is secured by cameras when, outside, there were none? I made my way to the changing rooms to change into my prep outfit and saw that he'd taken a different one that led to the offices. This reassured me a little, as it confirmed my theory that he was just an employee. Throughout my evening at work, I thought about this man and couldn't stop wondering why he had waited on the floor with me. One of the most likely scenarios I thought of was that he probably thought the door was closed and that I was waiting to be let in, and that by instinct he just sat down and waited with me without saying anything. For most of my shift, I was alone in my area and continued to work, except that at one point I heard a man coughing, and turning around, I saw him. The man stood there, straight as an eye, staring at me. When I noticed he was staring at me, I jumped up and asked, "Can I help you?" But the man said nothing and continued to stare at me blankly. After about 2 minutes, which seemed like hours, he walked towards me. My instincts were screaming at me to run away from this man, but I couldn't. I was stunned, and when he was less than 2 meters away, he put his hand in his pocket. I thought he was going to pull out a knife or something and stab me, but instead he pulled out a pack of cigarettes, still intact, handed them to me and walked out. It was the same brand as the one I'd been smoking, but it didn't belong to me, for the simple reason that I buy my cigarette packs individually, and once this one is empty, I go and buy another, but I never buy several packs at the same time. What's more, he could never have known what brand it was, since I didn't take my pack out in front of him. After that, I never saw him again. I moved to another area that evening to talk to other colleagues, but they were dubious about my story. I also tried to tell my superiors, but they didn't believe me either, because you need an access card to enter the building, and according to them, if this stranger was able to get in, he probably had one. The problem was that I was the one who opened the door, and the man simply walked through before it closed. Nevertheless, I continued to work there until the end of my contract, but I still don't know who this man is or what he wanted from me. Why did he sit so still next to me that night? Why did he follow me into an employee area? Why did he watch me for so long without saying a word? And why did he give me that unopened pack of cigarettes? A series of events started to happen when I was very young, around 8 to 9. There is a chance the series were not connected. My feeling is, it's all connected, to one disturbed man. The first event was the phone started ringing almost every night between 2 o'clock and 2:30 a.m. Being a light sleeper, it woke me constantly. My parents didn't ever appear to be bothered, probably because they both were drunk almost every night and passed out. Even when I did complain, they would just respond by saying it was probably the wrong number or something along those lines. It gave me a bad feeling every night hearing that loud rattling landline phone ringing in the kitchen. One night, out of curiosity and frustration, when that phone rang, I decided to answer it. I heard some distant music in the background and heavy breathing. Now, being older, I can say it sounded like someone was sitting in a bar. Eventually, my parents changed the number. A few months after my parents changed the number, I was awakened again, but by a different sound. There is something creepy about hearing noises at night in an isolated country house. Every little sound can be heard. Every sound lingers. You can feel it. So when I heard that car slowing down on the road in front of our house, it woke me with an unsettling feeling. I remember I could hear how the tires drove over the gravel in the driveway. My heart sank. I looked up at the wooden square clock in my bedroom. It was 2:17 a.m. For reasons I cannot explain, I crawled out of my bed and walked out to the living room and glanced out the windows that hung above the driveway. I kept my distance from the window so he couldn't see me. I stared down at him through the sheer curtains. A man in a dark-colored Buick Century sat in a car facing my house. I couldn't make out distinctive facial features. I could see he had light-colored hair with a bowl-cut style. If I had to guess now, I would say he was in his early to mid-30s. He just sat there. He started up at my house in a trance. I don't even remember him moving. I waited to see what he was going to do. I was filled with fear. Around 15 minutes, he just sat there. Then he very slowly backs up and drives away. He kept his eyes on the house as he drove away. So maybe wrong house, or he was drunk. Who knows? Then I think he visited again. It was a Sunday evening, and I was in the front yard playing with my siblings. I still remember that dreaded feeling of returning to school the next day. A car pulls up, and it stops in front of the mailbox down on the road. Our house was on a little hill with a back road in front. The mailbox was down on the road. We stopped playing and watched down in curiosity. We knew it was Sunday and the mail doesn't come. Also, that is not the regular mailman's car. The man continued to sit there staring up at us. At one point, he reached his arm out the window and acted like he put something in the mailbox. then drove about 50 yards up the road and stopped and sat. So my siblings told me to go check the mailbox. I don't know why they told me to. Maybe because I was the youngest. I walked down the little hill and opened the mailbox, and nothing was in it. Suddenly I'll hear tires screeching, and the car was flying towards me in reverse. I screamed, and we all ran into the house. He drove off very fast. We told our parents, and they thought we were confused and minimized the situation. That night, while laying in bed, it clicked in my head. That man was the same man that came that one night. It was the same car, and I remember the blonde hairstyle. An unsettling feeling sank in. About a year after that, one day in school, I heard teachers telling kids to avoid a dark-colored Buick. They said a man was trying to kidnap kids at their mailbox after getting off the bus. I moved out of that town a few years later when my parents got divorced. Every once he comes to my dreams, but I never heard anything about this man ever again. This story is about a bad experience I had when I went camping on the beach in the summer with my boyfriend. We had the nice idea of camping on the beach instead of going to a hotel, since I always wanted to sleep and hear the waves hitting the shore, see the night sky whenever I wanted, and just live this experience at least once in my life. We were supposed to stay in our tent for a week. The area had public restrooms with showers and restaurants, so the matter of hygiene and hunger were not an issue. We bought all the supplies we needed for such an adventure. A 2-person tent which was blacked out. The sun rays wouldn't come in. An inflatable mattress, a first aid kit, lanterns for the tent, etc. The first nights were no issue. We actually enjoyed every moment of it. We would always take all of our valuable with us in a backpacks in case anything bad would happen to our tent. Phones, chargers, wallets, etc. We weren't the only people that camped in that area. There were plenty of people that would camp there, either single people, couples, or even families, which includes even people that behaved badly. When night came, you would occasionally hear people laughing, partying, dancing, listening to music up to smoking weed, taking drugs, or drinking a lot of alcohol. We didn't mind it as nobody had bothered anyone for the past 4 days and nights. People were having fun as they knew best, and no one was being aggressive to that point. On one night, we stayed out later than the usually, around 1 a.m. just wandering around the lively streets to listen to street performers, eating out and such. When we stopped at one of such street performers, who seemed to have a lot of people circling him and listening to his music, we realized he wasn't the main character the people were gathered for. In the middle of the crowded street, where cars would occasionally pass by, was a middle-aged woman dancing completely naked, clearly affected by the abuse of alcohol and or consume of drugs. She was incoherent. She would randomly flirt with people. She would expose herself while dancing to the music, despite the disgust of the musician and the passerbyers. We didn't look much into it and decided to leave back to our tent and just have a drink in silence while watching the stars and falling asleep to the sounds of the ocean. While drinking ourselves, we hear some lady shouting in the distance. It's the same woman we had seen before. But she was not alone. She had friends with her, 2 women and 2 women. They had a camp set on the same beach with us, a few tents further from us, but not far enough so that we couldn't hear them or see them, even if it was dark. They lit a fire on the beach and continue to drink, smoke, and dance around it. She, of course, is still naked, but this time she is wearing a see-through skirt. She goes in the ocean for what seems to be an eternity. I remember thinking, how is she not cold? The water must be freezing. My buff just shrugged and told me not to be bothered. If we don't engage with her / them, they wouldn't annoy us. So I did as told. But even so, I always felt as if being watched. Put my thoughts aside, we decide to go to sleep. But being a beautiful night and the air warm, we thought of not closing the tent completely. Just zip the mosquito cover so the air would circulate inside the tent and have the sun shine in the morning to wake us early. I don't recall how long I've been sleeping for, but I remember being awoken by footsteps circling our tent and a womanly voice humming a song softly. The tent was not very thick. You could hear everything outside of it. I was too afraid to look out. Heck, I was too afraid to even change my position as to not indicate to the outsider that I noticed their presence. All I did was lay down and look outside through the mosquito cover. All of a sudden, I hear the footsteps stop above my head and the voice whispering, "Don't be afraid. I only want to sing you a lullaby." And the footsteps began again to circle the tent. I see her feet in front of our tent just passing by, noticing the very familiar long see-through skirt blowing behind her. Next morning, we packed our tent and moved in a different area of the beach, further away as possible from that woman and her friends.